for years when I actually started making money, I didn't understand the concept of money at all because I grew up without money. It was very much like it meant nothing in a weird way. It was like, well, I have this money, so I just spend this money. I didn't like understand the correlation of it like moving to the future.
One, two, three, four.
Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Dapper Dollars, where we answer your questions for personal finance and also how to look your best self. I'm Anirban Bomik, and to my side
I'm George Anirban,
and we are your hosts for this show. So let's dive right into it. To start off the episode, George and I were actually brainstorming about how to start off our show, and we noticed that it's a bit taboo to talk about finance, and what we've noticed is it can be a little bit sensitive topic. It's almost as taboo as talking about politics or even religion at work. Maybe not at that extreme, but it can be. I think for George and I, when we've been talking about personal finance, such as like budgeting and investing, it can be a little comfortable for us just because we come from a finance background. But I think it's a little bit sensitive towards others just because they're not too comfortable with talking about such a personal subject, even talking about how much maybe they have in their bank account. So what I wanted to get into is how to break that barrier, and how do we introduce that is by inviting our special guest for today, where they don't come from a conventional finance background, but they're very comfortable to share that with us today with our audience. So today, Dapper Dollars has the pleasure to introduce Katrina Naficy and Juliette Sieve.
So thank you both for coming. We're so glad to have you on the show. It's been a process, but I just thank you for making the time to come have a conversation with us. So Katrina, you are a filmmaker with over a decade of experience. Basically, you moved from Arkansas to New York at 17. That's brave, brilliant. You've got a massive following on TikTok. I mean, your videos are just brilliant and funny for M days. So, and also most importantly, you just landed your dream role with Mythical Entertainment. So congrats on that. So just thank you for coming here to have a conversation with us.
And today we have Juliette as well. She is coming from the New York Times. I believe you're a research director for the games division, which is awesome. I love Wordle. From before that, you had a lot of experience within human experience, user experience within different industries, such as the healthcare, banking, autonomous vehicle. You also got your degrees and master's degree from UT Austin. Go Longhorns. And it sounds like you've also had a business outside of work, which you were working on your handmade card business. Let's just start us off. I wanted to throw a fun question to you guys. So let's imagine, the Powerball just happened, but let's go back a few weeks back, and it seems like it was a pretty good amount. But let's just say you won $10 million from that, and it showed up on your bank account. What would you do with that money? So I wanted to start off with you, Katrina.
Oh, that's such a hard question. I think I'd give like $1 million away to my close friends and family because why not? They need it. And then the rest, this is probably not good for a finance podcast, but whatever. The rest, I would probably open like a luxury dog sanctuary for like dogs that don't have homes, and hopefully use that other 9 million to sustain that company for a good 20 to 30 years without needing a lot of profit. I know that's really lame, but I want to give like homeless dogs like luxury living. Like I want them to have like spas and like TVs in their rooms and like just maybe daily massages and like therapy treatments. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. So that's what I would do with 10 million.
Awesome answer.
How about you, Juliette?
Well, I have to say, my partner loves dogs, so he would be thrilled to know that this exists in the world. So I hope you get your $10 million. I think for me, $10 million is almost impossible to actually comprehend. Like that's such a sum that, I don't even know what that means really. But I think maybe an initial boring answer is I would put half away immediately, invest it, put it into some target funds, just pretend it doesn't exist. Then I think I would probably split that half again and have half of it be fun money, buy a place in Paris, probably in the south of France, New York, why not? And then, give some to my family as well. And then, that other half, my brother has OCD, so I think I would give quite a bit of it to, that kind of research and just helping people out who, struggle with OCD.
Brilliant, brilliant answer. That is awesome. And just getting to hear you both share your perspective on how you want to actually handle that money, it just gives everyone that understanding that, hey, everyone has their needs and how to actually go and forward and make things happen. So cool. Thank you so much. Nice.
So it sounded like both of you had two different answers, and I like that just because one was like yours was like, hey, let's give it back to charity, but also let's start a business with that, like, right, Katrina? And then Juliette, yours was, hey, let's take that half so I can invest it long term, but then I'll still do something with like either probably providing it for research or like give it to family. So let's start this conversation right here. So what does finance mean to you? I'll start with you, Juliette.
This is a tricky one, but I think really fundamentally for me, finance means freedom. Really at its base, it's understanding how to make money work for you in order to help you live the life that you want to live, which I think part of finance is also respecting that looks different for different people, right? That people value different things. And I think our answers here just showed, right, that there's different interests out there, but that finance means that freedom, right, for everyone to be able to invest and, spend extravagantly on the things that they care about and then save in other areas where, maybe they don't care so much for.
Yeah, I actually was going to say the exact same thing.
Great minds. Great minds.
Yeah. I when I think of the word finance, I literally think like freedom or, I grew up very poor, trailer park in Arkansas kind of vibes. But to me, I always grew up being like, I don't want that for myself. So knowing how much money I have at any given point in time is just freedom to me, whether that's a little bit or a lot, just knowing that I have something there as security. That's what finance means to me, I think, overall.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to just unpack just what you said. Like, so the fact that you mentioned growing up poor, and what would you say? Would you say that has actually been a big factor for you looking to be successful in life too, as well?
Yeah, I definitely think that was like a driving force. It's, when you're a kid, it's not that I expected a lot as a child, but it was the little things like wanting to be in dance and have like the best shoes, or wanting to take dance classes and not being able to afford that. It was like the little things my whole life, just being like, when I'm an adult, I want to be able to take care of those things for myself. So now, like, I don't have to think twice about being like, I want to take a dance class. I want to get this new subscription. I want these shoes. Yeah, it's a huge driving factor in my life because I knew I didn't want that for myself or my children growing up.
Nice.
Awesome.
So now going into that, how do you perceive money now? Like it seems like you said, there's a path of freedom, but then right when you get money, like how do you utilize that too?
Yeah, I try, for years when I actually started making money, I didn't understand the concept of money at all because I grew up without money. It was very much like it meant nothing in a weird way. It was like, well, I have this money, so I just spend this money. I didn't like understand the correlation of it, like moving to the future. Um, but now I kind of try to make money not be like the end all be all. So it's very much like, I have certain things that I want to do, right? And regardless of if I think something's too much money, or not enough, or if I'm spending too much or too little, I try not to make that be like my overall perception of money. So like if I want to do something expensive, I do that thing because I want to do it. And I just know in the back of my head, okay, next month I'm going to have to work twice as hard to replenish that money that I spent doing the thing that was probably a little bit too expensive. So I think it's very much like a give and take, go with the flow. That's kind of how I see it nowadays.
How about you, Juliet?
Yeah, I mean, I think money for me inherently is something that's very stressful, right? It's something that can really make or break your situation, right? It's also something that can cause you to second guess things, right? You like one of the things that I've really had to learn is how to make sure that money doesn't create this constant dialogue of making me regret things, right? There's nothing worse than going to buy something or, going or traveling or doing something and then just constantly thinking about like, did I make the right choice? Did I have enough money for this? Did I? And so I think, I had initially this perception of money as just being this stressful thing that you always had to keep a pulse on at all times. And part of the challenge for me, and I think for a lot of people, is shifting that perception where you can be in control. And I think a lot of that is just, one of the reasons that we're here today is just to break down this taboo around talking about money and realizing that money doesn't actually have the control. You have the control, and there are steps that you can take to make sure that, right, money's your friend and it gives you this freedom we were talking about rather than stressing you out and guilt tripping you and causing you to stop enjoying the things that, it's intended to help you be able to do and enjoy.
Awesome. I just wanted just to follow up with a quick question. So, how has today's environment impacted that perception? Like,
Hmm.
are you more cautious? Are you like so? What are your thoughts with that now?
I mean, I think part of that is having a system in place, right? So actually, you have to think less about money and about knowing how the system works, right? There's increased inflation, right? Which you have to consider for your budget and what that actually means, right? Being realistic about that, right? You can think about like how you wish things would be, but that's not going to help you. You can, go vote and things like that, but it's still right not going to change the immediate right now, which is things cost more. So being realistic about your budget, right? Food costs are going up, so you got to budget for it, right? And being realistic about that. But then also, I think seeing the stock market dip for me, it's knowing that I'm playing the long term, I'm playing the long game, and I'm looking to, 20, 30 years from now and just trusting in that and knowing, right, that, hey, you know what? Maybe for the next 3 months, maybe for the next year, I'm actually not going to really go look at my investments because that's actually not what they're there for. They're there for, 20 years from now. And so just knowing that I'm going to stay the course, but knowing that and having faith and trust in what you're doing and the process that you've set up, for me, at least in this environment, is really helpful, right? Of knowing again that I have the control, not the market, not the money. But, it's psychologically, right? You have to retrain yourself from a lot of things that you've been told, you know, the stock market's crashing, you should panic. And it's like, no, I shouldn't panic. Like, that's the wrong thing to do. But it's hard, right? To have to reteach yourself those things.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because you're not coming from a conventional finance. And like, I think like both of us in business school, from like our
Yeah.
professors, they've always said, yeah, like having that long term and game plan, but also they're big proponents of like markets that are efficient. So, you know, who was it that taught you something like that, or did you kind of did a lot of reading? Like, what was it that make you learn that you're not emotionally invested right now? What's happening, but you know that it's gonna come out in the positive in the long run.
Yeah, I did reading. I read. I looked things up. I just got to know. I think coming from a research background, that's inherently my go to is to figure out, right, where are my emotions coming from? Like, why am I feeling like this? And how do I, like, if I want to change it, what should I do to do that? And there are so many resources available, right? There's also bad resources available, which I also learned. You read things and people are like, oh, you should totally go invest in this one thing. And then you're like, wait a minute, like, that also doesn't sound quite right. But yeah, it was a lot of, you know, reading books, looking at things, right? Also just like being patient with myself of playing around with different things, like what actually works for me, because there's a lot of different types of techniques, right? For budgeting, for, you have your 50, 20, 30 splits, you have all of these different ways of looking at money. And it's really thinking about what do I want, which is a great like self-reflection exercise, which is kind of what it started as for me, is like, what do I want in 5 years and 10 years, and not being ashamed to plan for that, right? I think there's, people are worried to plan for a wedding, for example, because they're like, how presumptuous of myself. Like, I'm not with anybody, I'm not engaged. Like, why would I plan for that? When really, like, that's, you're paying it forward to yourself. And so that's how, as I was reading for things, I was looking at it from a perspective of which of these techniques are going to help me pay it forward best to myself. And that's what I let, guide me towards where I am today. But it's not easy. It sounds easy in hindsight, but it's not, when you have to discipline yourself and say, like, I want that, but I don't actually want that right now.
I agree. I think the discipline is the hardest part,
Yeah.
especially when you don't have that foundational understanding of it.
Uh-huh.
It's hard to actually build it. Katrina, do you care to share a perspective as well?
Yeah, so I am not in the stock market game, so I literally have no idea what's going on. But as far as like my day to day, as someone who what has been a freelancer for years, obviously I have a full time job now, but I still freelance on the weekends because I like making money. Um, there's been a huge shift in my thought process for things. Just as far as like in the past, I would maybe take a job that was like $200 or $300 lower than what I would normally go for. But now I'm very persistent and I will not take jobs lower than what my rate is, because I know at the end of the day it's going to end up costing me more money and losing more money by doing these jobs that aren't paying me what I feel like I should be paid. And I'm kind of like hard about it now, but it sucks because I have to be, because things have to get paid and I have to feed myself and make sure my house doesn't like burn to the ground or something. So, it's important. It's important to me to be a stickler with how much I get paid nowadays, which sucks because I hate being that person, but it's just the environment we're in right now.
That answer right there, you just kind of hit the home run of like valuing yourself, but also at the same time, how do you manage it in an environment like this? And I feel like I can uncover so much from that answer, but like even something of like a value, like what you just said right there is like, hey, I value myself as this much, and so this is the rate I will be get paid, or nothing more, or not, sorry, nothing less. You always want more.
Nothing more. I don't want more money. That's stupid.
But, like, so this goes to like, when we're talking about spending things, and what you just said, you consider yourself valued as this much, but like looking into purchasing maybe like designer products, or like something that's like luxurious products and it's like high value, and you kind of know what the cost is to like maybe produce a shirt. Maybe it's like 10-15 bucks, but then like if you go to a luxury brand, they'll charge like 300 bucks for like that one shirt, right? So now that you said that, like, of like, hey, I value myself by this, how do you perceive that kind of stuff when you're actually like looking into at the shopping mall, and then you see like a shirt that's like 300 bucks? Like, do you say like, you know what, I value that, or maybe like, I'm really curious about this.
That is a good question. Yeah.
I do value it. It's like the same thing with, like, if I was to go to Amazon to get like, say like a potted plant. I'm really into plants. So say I go to Amazon to get a potted plant. I can get a base for a plant like for like $20 on Amazon, right? But I love to go to Etsy because they have really unique handmade pieces that cost significantly more. Sometimes like up to $300 for a pot, for a very simple pot, like a tiny little pot. But yeah, I think there's lots of value in that. I also think I don't know if there's value in like designer. I don't know how to phrase this. Like, I'm not a huge designer person, like designer bags, designer clothes. I like nice quality clothes, but I also feel like Balenciaga, they'll literally just have like a t-shirt for like $600, and I don't understand that. Mostly because I don't feel like the creativity outweighs what anyone else could make, if that makes sense. So I guess I base a lot of how people hike things up in price based off creativity, I guess, is where I'm going with that, if that makes any sense at all. But I do value people that know their worth. There's a lot of really creative people that make things that other people have never made before, and I find that amazing, and I think they should get all of the money they deserve. I can't afford it a lot of the time, but I love to look at it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like there's a market for everything, right? And because as a
Yeah.
creator, you understand like a simple shirt with a logo, like that's easy print screen, boom, and then you can charge whatever because of the brand value.
Yeah.
But you understand the hard work if it's like an intricate design or like that small pottery piece. It takes time, and you respect the artist, right? So that's a really good answer.
Yeah. Also another thing in regards to that, I just realized I feel like it also is like how much more your status goes up with things. Like, say 10 years ago, I would go to Target and get like a $20 purse, and that felt like a really big purchase to me. Like spending $20 on a purse was like a big deal. Nowadays, I don't even like think about spending $200 or $300 on a purse. I'm like, oh, that's just where I'm at in my life. So it's interesting to me. I always think about that. You know, like Balenciaga, say that purse is $10,000. To somebody else, that might be just a, oh, yeah, that's just the price I pay for a purse. Versus me, it's like 300, and 10,000 sounds absolutely insane. But it's an interesting perspective to think of as like 10,000 being like a casual price for an item, but it is what it is for some people.
By the way, to the audience, this video is not sponsored by Balenciaga. I don't think
So yeah, that's
It is. It is. They're lying to you.
I think that's perfect. And that is the perfect segue to our next question. So basically, we still want to understand. I mean, you and both shared like different perspective on money. So, what are your money habits these days? Like, does it stop at like, do you track the stock market? Do you wake up and just check your checking account or your savings account every day?
Um, I mean, for me, it's on autopilot, which is like what I want, right? Is that I don't have to go look at anything. It's, I know how much I'm getting paid. Everything is automated. So things go to my savings account, various savings, emergency funds, things that I'm saving up for, vacations, things like that. Part of it, automatically going to my 401k, automatically going into my investment portfolios. And then I know how much I have for fixed expenses, and then I know how much is for fun money. And that's it. It's automated, and I don't, I go check in every now and then to make sure, credit card statements aren't looking kind of crazy, because you never know. But otherwise, right, like, yeah, and for me, it feels like such a win that I wake up and I don't really have to think about it. Like, what a privilege to just know that things are going where they need to go. I'm being set up for the future in the way that I want to be. I know how much I can spend. I know what I care to spend on, right? Like, for me, I don't care so much about, like how my place really looks, right? I don't need like the nicest pillows or anything like that, but like I really care about shoes. And so, I know when I see a shoe that I like, I'm like, "Oh, I like that shoe." And that's it. Like if we've looked at each other and like I know that heel's not going to like twist my ankle, I'm out of there with it. So, and that for me is just like again, like I said, what more could I ask for? Lipstick as well. If there's a lipstick I fall in love with, we're just like, let's go home. So yeah, but that's really it for me. But again, that process took time, right? Of figuring out, like I mentioned, what matters, like how much should I put away into my savings? What am I saving for, right? What do I want to be saving for? Making sure that my investments are set up in a way that I feel is secure, that I don't have to, constantly be checking up on, right? I know that I don't like want to constantly be rebalancing my portfolio myself. So I stick with target funds, because it does it for me. But those are all decisions, right, that I had to make in order to get to this point. Before then, I was definitely one of those people who opened up my bank account and was like, "How much is in here? Like, what's happening in this place?" So yeah, I'm really glad to be here, but it's a lot of work. But autopilot is, I hope that for everyone.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned all this because for this show, that's kind of like what we also want to help our listeners do is how do you automate those? How do you figure out the percentage when you're coming in with a certain paycheck or whatever income? How do you look at that, and then how do you maximize that, right? So I'm glad you mentioned that. So Katrina, do you is that your same? Would you say that's like your same money habit, or would it be little tad bit different, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely on autopilot now too, but that's probably been like a newer, probably the last like 2 years. Mostly again, because I've always freelanced and I just recently in the last few years have had like a full income, not full income, full time income. So it's easier to be on autopilot with that. Just because you always know the exact amount you're getting in. With freelance, you're like, could make this much this month and zero next month. But yeah, I have the habit of, again, I don't have any investments or anything right now. My boyfriend does. So I just let him do his thing. He'll give us millions later or something. I don't know. But I always just have the habit of I break all my paychecks in half. Half goes into savings, half goes into just my regular checking account. And then I kind of look at my checking as like, you can do whatever you want. Like, let's go, girl, kind of vibe. So, like, I obviously pay bills with my checking account and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I kind of just monthly, like, my checking account is just like whatever I want to spend that money on. I can spend all of it if I want. I usually don't, but if I wanted to, I can. And I try not to make myself feel guilty about that. And then my savings, I never, ever, ever touch. I've been growing my savings for like almost 4 years now. And honestly, I can't even tell you the last time I checked it. I just have the automatic thing where I take half of it out. I even have the actual like tab in my Bank of America for my savings account closed. So you can't actually, I don't actually see how much is in there because it's kind of like a mental game for me of like, I pretend like that money doesn't exist. I put it in that account and I pretend like it doesn't exist. And it's kind of like my way, because I feel like if I think about it too much, I'd be like, well, I do have that extra income in there. I could throw at things. So I like to like put it away and pretend like it's not there. And yeah, that's kind of how I go with the flow. And obviously I've learned a lot about credit cards, which has been really, really fun, getting points and all that stuff. I really love credit cards now. So that's kind of like my thing right now.
I want to jump
Great.
in quickly and do an
Yeah.
anti-sponsorship just to
For
say
Balenciaga.
for Bank of America and say that
Oh
bank does
no!
not deserve your savings. They have crappy interest rates. You want that high yield savings account? Go
Okay,
get
where do
that.
I go?
Go to Charles Schwab, go to Wealthfront. Wealthfront has like a
Oh,
3.3 and like
Yeah.
go make
okay.
that money work for you. Like
Okay.
Bank of America does not deserve that savings account.
You're
No way,
right. You're
girl.
right. I was gonna say that, but I just yeah.
Go
I had no idea actually.
toss it out of there. Mm-mm.
Okay, good to know. Good
No.
to know.
And that's a good point. I mean, she like Wealthfront, Betterment, those are like basically low overhead costs banking institutions,
Yeah.
and so that way they can provide their customers like us with a higher yield. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I was just going to add. So there would be links in the episode notes where we get to link up on just a high yield savings account that give you the best bang for your buck, basically. So
That'd be awesome.
expect that.
And then don't forget the Balenciaga sponsor as well. Link in the description.
Definitely.
Use promo code TABBERDollars at checkout.
Hey, Katrina, I wanted to ask you this question.
Yeah.
You're like in the entertainment industry. Might be having some listeners that are in the entertainment industry. So, like being in the entertainment industry, and now you're pretty much like I like hearing about your financial story because, like, from your beginnings to like where you are now, it is such a great achievement that you've gone through. Especially like coming to like at 17, coming to New York City. That's not easy. That's not an easy place to live in.
I don't know how I did it, honestly.
And it's such a like cool inspiration for like us and also like the listeners out there. But like, what would you say? What you've learned from the beginning to now you are like, what's like the stuff that you would write to your younger self?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a tough question because when I think back on my younger self, especially when I first moved to New York, the first like 3 years of living there, I mean, I worked my ass off. I can't even think of a time where I just was like relaxing. I was either at a job that paid me terribly or running to an audition or I was in college at the time too, so going to college and I had no money. I mean, I had this thing where I found out on Venmo that you could overdraft your bank account. So I would pay my rent every month by overdrafting my bank account $800. But like my a letter I would say to myself, and I know this might not really fit into the whole like financial help area, but I think it's so important for people who are younger and in that situation where you are just I worked harder than I ever did in my life when I was making the least amount of money I've ever made. Now I make the most money I've ever made and I like literally just like lay around all day. Not really work. I work all the time. I'm always working. Um, but I think it's really important to know when you're that young and getting started, and especially when you come from no money, it sucks. But if you like are so dedicated and you keep working, that eventually all of that work that you've put in will financially pay off in the end. I swear to God, if you stick to one thing for years, takes years, but you will eventually have financial freedom with that industry or with that job or with that career that you choose. You just have to go, at least for me, I had to go through some really, really, really tough times. And I think it's really important. I would love to tell my younger self, like, don't beat yourself up so much. Like there would be so many nights where I would just be sobbing because I had like 3 cents in my bank account, or like I'd be overdrafted and didn't know how I was going to eat that week. But it always works out, and you always can find people that care for you and love for you and just keep working, and it really, really will pay off one day, I promise.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant.
Yeah.
And again, that is a big feat. Like, just moving out that young and coming to just do and doing what you did. That is brilliant. So, Julia, this question is for you. So, you are originally from Paris, France. Shout out to PSG, my best soccer team. So your education and career accomplishments basically it speaks a lot of like your grit, like your determination. So I guess my question would be: so having experienced like or had an orientation to by both cultures, basically like
Mm.
Europe and here in the US. What would you say? I mean, first off, are you over the culture shock? And secondly, what would you say was the biggest misalignment in terms of how people perceive money? And here, and like just like if you can get to share on them that basically. So
Yeah, I can definitely do that. And before I do that, I'm going to take just another dump on the big banks, which is overdraft fees. If you're paying overdraft
It's
fees,
insane.
go somewhere else because there are places that don't give you overdraft fees. And I just like when I hear that,
Wait,
I want to tell like younger Katrina, like, you don't deserve overdraft
I
fees.
know.
Um,
It's messed up. But guys, I have to say something because this is a hilarious story that I totally forgot about. I overdrafted my bank account for 2 years straight every time I paid my rent, right? And I always got the fees, whatever. One night, I'm in a joint Uber ride home from a bar from Manhattan to Brooklyn, and I'm talking to this guy. It was like a joint Uber. I'm talking to this guy. He ends up being the owner of Venmo. And I tell him how what I was doing. I told him that every month I overdraft my bank account with Venmo because I could overdraft like as much as I needed pretty much. And he ended up being like, "Are you kidding me? I didn't know we allowed our company to do that." He was like, "I got to call Tom in the morning, and next time I try to overdraft, it would not allow me." So I screwed myself over by telling the owner of Venmo that you could do that. So, anyways, sorry, Juliette.
no,
I just forgot. I
that
forgot about that crazy story.
that is totally wild, but feels like a totally New York thing to happen anyhow. So, but no overdraft fees. If a bank's charging you overdraft fees, you're out of there. But your question around, culture shock, am I over it? I think one of the hard things of, being from one place and then growing up in a different place is you kind of don't belong in either place. I was too French for here, and then, I miss cultural references and things from living in the States back in France. So then I, wasn't quite French enough. So, there's this constant tension that exists. My least favorite question is probably, where are you from? Because I'm like, oh gosh, like, do you have 1 minute or do you have 10 minutes? Like, are we getting deep, or am I just gonna say like from France, but I lived in Texas? So, anyways, it's difficult, and I think anyone who moved from another country to anywhere probably has had a similar experience. But in terms of kind of financial misalignments, I think one of the biggest things is in France, credit cards don't exist. The concept of credit does not exist, right? It's debit cards only. You pay with the money that you have in your bank account. And so that's something, right, coming here of really having to learn, right? Like you need credit here, right? Like having credit impacts the loan rate, right? That you get, the mortgage rate that you get for a house, right? No credit, you get a really crappy mortgage. You have to pay private insurance on that mortgage, right? It's all of these terrible things that you don't actually know. And then in order to, in order to build up that credit, you have to get a credit card, which does this, still this wild thing to me, which is, you can buy things that you may or may not have the money for, which blows my mind as a concept of like, what? Like you just let people like buy things that they can't actually afford. And I get it for some situations, right? You have bigger purchases, things like that, but still to some degree, I'm like, you should save for that and then buy it when you can. There's emergencies. I get that. Even short-term loans, I feel, are better than a credit card because it makes you feel invincible, and that's dangerous, right? Anytime you feel invincible, I'm like, there should be red flags going off somewhere. But yeah, I would say that's a really big thing, is having to learn, right, how to, because credit is something you have to learn how to manage, right? So it's something that you can use to your advantage and doesn't get used against you, right? Because credit card debt is terrible, right? That interest rate is horrid. It's terrible. And so I think that's really something that, I had to learn. I watched my family learn, of just, figuring out like, how do we navigate this? Like, what does it mean? And then, it's also something then like my parents and I didn't really talk about it growing up because, you know, and then there's also, different expenses that you have to account for here that you don't have to account for in France, right? Healthcare is super expensive, right? You have to think about like, what insurance plan do I get? Do I go to the doctor? Do I not go to the doctor? Have I budgeted for the doctor, right? It's things that you forget about that you have to budget for and think about. Whereas, you don't have to do that so much um, in France. And then, you just have like different government regulations that, right, like you have rent caps in Paris, right? Things can't be rented to a certain degree. Whereas, you know, I live in New York and no one cares about rent caps there, right? They're like, oh no, like this, like half of a shoebox with a bathroom downstairs, like of course that's $3,000. And you're like, what? But there's no one right to do anything about it. So I think also like having to realize that there's a lot of, you know, like you have to like live within those constraints that you don't have so much so over there. So there's definitely, you got to learn a lot of things.
Brilliant.
Good answer.
Good answer. Yeah.
I feel like every time I say good answer, I always think of Family Feud because everybody's like, good answer. But no, I really like that answer because you mentioned also the fact about like the credit card. Like you're doing a lot of plugs for our future episodes. And what we wanted to talk about eventually in the later episodes about, just kind of playing the game here in America. It's like there is like debt, right? And it's always considered as like this nasty old thing, but then there's also good debt. And like, how do you take like the concept of leverage and then how do you do that and then take advantage of that and make more financial opportunities for yourself, right? So we're going to be talking about more on that later on later episodes.
Yeah,
But
I agree, and I'll just to sort of add to what you said. So, like you, I shared that experience. So, I was born in Nigeria. I moved to England at a young age. So, lived in England, then moving here. So, to me, having had that fortune to have seen how money is perceived across three continents, I'm like, okay, now I see how money works and stuff. So I guess that's why this is such a passion for myself. And, obviously, like, we have the same idea to really break down money and really understand the concepts and stuff like that. So I really do appreciate that you were able to share. So thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're kind of like getting near the end of our show, but we wanted to add some of the few fun questions too. So this is Dapper Dollars, so emphasis on the Dapper. So we wanted to ask both of you, what is your tip or trick that you'd like to share about a fashion sense that to our listeners. We'll start with you, Katrina.
Oh God. Okay, I do have something that I've really liked recently. Again, not an ad, not a sponsor. I just really like this. It's Stitch Fix. I don't know if you guys have heard of Stitch Fix at all, but it's supposed to be like a personal shopper that like you give them all your sizes and what you like and your style. They're not like it's not like super creative clothing. I like very very loud prints and like sometimes I look at what I'm wearing and I just actually scare myself because I just it's so much color all the time. They don't have like crazy prints or anything, but they have really nice basic things. And they send you a box every month, I think with like 6 or 10 items in it. And they're all like discounted because they're maybe not like this year's trend or like this year's like hot item. They're probably like last year or the year before. But anyways, they send you a box of clothing. You get to pick whichever all of them, none of them, one of them, five of them, doesn't matter. But you get $20 off if you pick an item, which I think is really cool. I usually pick one item out of my box and then that item is already discounted and then I get another $20 off of that. So I get like a really cool piece every month that's new and unique and usually costs me like $30. So that's kind of my like tip right now, trick for maybe getting some things that you wouldn't normally get. I like that it kind of puts me out of my comfort zone. Like actually for me makes me go with more basic type items instead of getting such loud prints all the time. But yeah, it's got me like the coolest blazers I have. Actually, this is from Stitch Fix.
Nice.
Looks nice.
Gorge, gorge.
Nice.
It's also really cool because it's like for your body size. So like you're never gonna get anything in the box that doesn't fit you, which I know like is so annoying when you're shopping and you try to put, like you'll go get like a medium somewhere and it doesn't fit like every other medium at every other store, which is very annoying. But yeah, it feels like it's for you and highly recommend. Not a sponsor, but check it out.
And for me, I did say that I like don't tend to play the stock market, except for actually Stitch Fix. I do have stocks that I personally invested in there. They're not doing great right now, I gotta say, but there's a really good Harvard
Okay.
Business review on them. So
Well, if you want to sponsor, just let us know.
you know,
So,
That's funny. I just got my Stitch Fix today and I was like, I wonder if this company's doing well. I feel like they're not.
their stock would say no, but generally because of sustainability, I think like, getting like clothes, minimalizing it, I think it might have another turn. But
Okay,
that's
cool.
my hope for the money that I invested. So I'm going to stay optimistic.
Good to know.
I think for me, which I'm French. I'm from Paris. I love fashion, right? Like it's a way of life, truly. But I think there's something. Okay, I have two things. The first thing is you can pull it off, right? Like you are the one who decides if you can pull something off or not anybody else. So I want to say that just very clearly, right? You think something's kind of crazy and you're like, oh, should I? Yes, you should, and you can. That's how trends start. But then I think for me, I'm like really into accessorizing right now. You can't really tell from what I'm wearing today, but um, fun like clip earrings that you can like put on for part of the day and then take off. In in France, we wear a lot of what's called a foulard, which is like a really thin like silk scarf kind of thing, but it's a lot smaller. You roll it up, you can wear it around your neck, then you can change it and might put it in your hair. You can wear it around your wrist as a fun bracelet, and I love like things that are modular throughout the day. So I think that's a fun tip, especially depending on how maybe you're feeling. You're feeling really good in the morning, you wear your clips, you take them off, you have your foulard in the afternoon, then at nighttime you turn it into a bracelet, and just really being modular with my accessories. So my tip, what I've been really rocking this month.
I like
Those
that.
are awesome tips. Yeah,
those
both
are-
of them.
yeah,
And even
yeah.
like the accessory one. I feel like you're big on the accessory. Like I've recently gotten into the accessory game.
Yeah.
Just like I'm big on just muted colors, just plain. But then after you add that little accessory piece, it just kind of like spruces up that outfit look. Like what about you?
For me, I feel maybe having lived in London, that's why I picked up my fashion sense. So, yes, I think Yes, I have been big on. I think I do more like a bracelet and like a nice chain, and but I think in the end it's just how the look comes together because not everyone can pull off that look. Sometimes you can wear that and you just look like you're just clanking like jewelry everywhere. But if you get to pull it off well, and it kind of speaks to your essence too as well. So yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
And I mean, I can speak for George. George is the most dapper person. Like, yeah, he's always got the cool accessories there.
Yeah.
But, okay,
Awesome.
cool. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was pretty much it. Like, if that's pretty much our show. We always provide, try to interview as many people as we can with talking about personal finance. But not only that, we like to have that fun factor of talking about fashion because that's kind of like both of our passions. Always like being mindful about your money, but always want to look good when you're spending your money.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. I think that's the most important part. But just to kind of pivot to because one thing we also want to do is provide our guests the platform to like get to share on their own information. So I know Julia, for example, you do have a small business. So feel free to take the time to like shout out, give us your ideal social media handles, and so everyone can know where to reach you basically. So
Yeah, well, just, my very quick pitch, I hand make greeting cards mostly because I would go to the store and they always just didn't look quite right to me, and also my cards are always all blank on the inside because there's nothing worse than finding a card that you really like and then you open it and you're like, "Why does it say that in there? Like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense." Or like, no, and I find myself just scratching off like the inside and being like, I didn't like what this said, so I'm writing something else. So it's really a creative outlet for me. Everything's done by hand, so yeah, if you're and there's something really special about, giving someone a card, right? Gestures don't always have to be big, and cards are something that I feel fit in a lot of budgets, and there's nothing I feel like, you should always have, sharing how you're feeling, thanking someone as part of your budget, just generally. So you can find me on Instagram at Life Adventure Cards for my small business specifically, and then on my website at julietteSieve.com, there's a link to my Etsy that's there, and I also love doing pop up shops too around different places when I can. So find me there, and then also as an aside, I love everything research and everything finance. So if you want to connect professionally as well, you can find me on LinkedIn with my first and last name too.
Yeah, I have a following for, I mostly make comedy videos. So if you are into laughing, I don't know, having a good time, you can follow me over there. I'm not Katrina with two A's at the end on all socials. And then if you're ever looking for a producer or director, you can get me on my website. It's katrina-naficy.com. Yeah.
brilliant.
great.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. If you guys love what you hear, leave a like and subscribe to our channel. So that's it for us. Tune in next time.
3, 2, 1.